Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to Locker Room. This is Southland's podcast for men, where we try to redeem men's conversations by doing two things. We want to talk about the right things, and we want to talk about the right things in the right way. So not always what men are known for, but we want men to be known for that. And so that's what we're trying to do on this podcast. If you are listening to us right now, which is what most people do, whether you're on your zero-turn mower in your truck or your car or your smart car, whatever it may be, you need to know that we are also on YouTube. You can watch us in this riveting experience of typically two dudes sitting across a table from each other inside this man cave studio that we've built. So if you ever do want to check us out on YouTube, please feel free to do that. Southland has a YouTube channel. I'm sure you can find it by just kind of searching for the Locker Room podcast as well. So today we're continuing in the season and talking about marriage, and I invited my friend Kevin Comp to join us. So Kevin, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Why don't you are one of our newest staff members. You might not be the very newest, but you are joining our team, and you are our Georgetown Campus pastor. And so we're all very, very excited to have you. And why don't you give us just a little bit of background about yourself, and then we'll dive in.
Sure. Well, I've been in ministry for a little over 25 years. I had a little break in between. We're going to talk about that, I think, today.
Yep.
But I've done middle school ministry for a great number of years.
God rest your soul.
Yeah.
It's the only youth ministry realm I never did, and that was intentional. So I worked with preschool kids, elementary kids, high school kids, college-age kids. Never worked with middle school. I've done some camps and things like that, but man, you got to be a special kind of person to want to work with middle school kids. So.
Well, the hazard is getting addicted to energy drinks and video games. But
yes.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It was a great age, I think, it's such a formative age for them to make some pretty big decisions.
Yeah,
so.
It's huge. It's huge. It takes the right people to be involved in their life during that time. So,
Yeah.
So you're married, you got kids. Tell us about them.
Married for going on 21 years. I got 3 kids, Levi, Joel, and Emery. Levi's 14, Joel's 11, Emery is 8. And they are awesome kids. I can't say enough good stuff about them. They're a lot of fun to be with, and they're actually been very positive about the move. Levi's already been to several of the youth nights, and
Cool.
and we're looking forward to it. Like Georgetown, it's very similar to where we're coming from. We're in Shelbyville, so it's a lot of the same.
Well, I know that staff's glad to have you. The folks up there are glad to have you, and so thanks for joining the team, man.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
We've been in this series where we've been talking about marriage. You referenced you've been married for 21 years, which is a good run. That's a very good run. You got 3 kids, but you were married before, and so you started off in ministry at a pretty young age, kind of like I did. How old were you when you kind of jumped on a church staff?
I was on church staff at 19.
Yeah.
While in college.
Yeah, me too. So I was interning down here at Southland when I was 18 years old, and so I tell people all the time I'm not that old, but I got a lot of miles on me,
Yeah.
And you're pretty similar,
Yeah. Well, I was at Northeast Christian Church in Louisville.
Yeah.
And doing middle school ministry, and was married and got married when I was 20.
Okay.
And went through a divorce when I was 25. I was on staff at Southeast at the time.
Yeah, so talk about, there's into that one little sentence you just threw out there, there's a whole lot packed, right? So
Yeah.
you're 20 years old, you get married, you're on staff at a big church in Louisville, Southeast Christian Church. They're good friends of ours over there. And divorce, what year was that?
I went through the divorce in 1997.
Okay, so, historically speaking in the Christian church world, divorce often felt like a scarlet letter,
Big D, right there on the chest.
Exactly.
It sure did.
And much less if you were a minister, as we referred to him back then, or pastor. It was an even bigger deal. So tell us as much as you want to tell us about what led up to the divorce, and then how you reacted to that huge event in your life.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. The story has changed over the 20-something years, because it used to be I just wanted to shove the blame, all the blame on my ex-wife. I wanted to say it was this and that and the other. And truthfully, especially in the premarital counseling before Stacey and I got married, I kind of discovered that I was doing a lot of things in leadership that was not helpful to a marriage. I used to say I was a workaholic, like I was kind of bragging, and it turns out I'm hiding for my leadership role in the home. So I would spend a lot of time at the office and call it work. But I threw some air quotes up there. People on YouTube can see that, but podcast, you might not be able to see that. But I was more hiding from some of the leadership responsibility I had at home, and I failed.
Well, and that is not uncommon, and I've talked about this with a lot of men, where the role that we're called to at home far exceeds the role that whatever role we're called to at work and through our vocation in regard to just difficulty and pressure. There's a lot to it, man. And a lot of men, will hide at work for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes because they feel very good about the job they do at work. They feel competent to do it. They get rewarded for it, that kind of thing. And then at home, sometimes men feel like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so the response is sometimes to do exactly what you said, to go hide. And that's kind of a passive response that we as men are very vulnerable to.
Yeah.
So
you could have wrote that statement in my yearbook. That was exactly me.
Yeah.
I just, I did really great at my job. I was great at the middle school ministry there at Southeast, rocking it. And it was fun. And at home, I was failing. We were fighting all the time. We were in counseling quite a bit. And it was a very difficult time.
Yeah.
And, there was certainly, we both played a part in the failure of the relationship, but there was definitely a part that I used to ignore.
Sure.
And as I've gotten older and wiser, I realized, I sloughed on the work process of a marriage. Yeah. Marriage is hard work. And I didn't work at it. I didn't fight for it like I should have. I was like, this is too hard. I'm just gonna go have fun.
Yeah. And even though there's such a thing as no fault divorce in our law, there's my air quotes. There's no such thing as no fault divorce. Now sometimes it may be 99% one person's fault, 1% the other, but two people certainly contribute whenever there's a divorce that happens. It's interesting, the Bible talks about how God hates divorce, and sometimes the church has translated that into God hates divorced people, and has unfortunately wounded a lot of people who've been through divorces, sometimes that were almost of no fault of their own or wherever they fell on that spectrum. So here you are, you're young. How old were you when the divorce happened?
25.
Okay, so you're 25 years old. Ministry life's going well, but then marriage life just ends up falling totally apart. You're at a big church. Take us from there. What were the dominoes that fell after that?
Well, it was just, I think it got to a point. We had been through a miscarriage. We were in counseling. We were trying to fight for the marriage. We were fighting a lot. I came home from a mission trip early because of a situation with my ex-wife, and it got ugly from there. I knew that in my heart the big letter D was going to be stitched on my sweater, and I'm done because I can't do it anymore. And I kind of was in that place where I'm like, I just give up. I can't fix her. I can't fix this. And I took my resignation to the leadership I was under and just said, I can't do this anymore. And it's funny because a few weeks later, I had a conversation with my ex-wife, and I told her, she asked if I was in love with her. And I said, I don't feel love for you right now. We had gone through so much, and I said, but I'm committed to loving you. And she got really upset with that. Yeah. That was disappointing for her because of she wanted the emotion.
That's not what a woman wants to hear. Yeah.
No. Yeah. Not at all. I remember that quite distinctly. She did not want to hear that.
But I don't feel love for you, but doggone it, I'll put my nose to the grindstone and work real hard at it. It's not what a woman wants to hear, right?
Come on, I think that's very romantic. So I was committed to loving her, but I was committed to loving her because I felt like that's what God wants. God wants us, and I still believe that. I still believe we should be working hard at our marriage. I still believe when the feelings or emotions are fading or waning, that we need to work hard, and that feeling will come back. But we're committed to one another, and she didn't want to hear that. And that was kind of a breaking point for her, and she went stayed with her sister, and I had to figure out what to do next. So I went and. I think that first year I had 15 jobs, and lead pastor from Northeast called me kind of very soon after I left Southeast and took me to lunch and asked me all these hard questions, which pastors love to do.
Yeah.
And it just was saying, hey, you're not going to just float away or, anything like that. So he brought me in. His name was Bob Cherry, and he just, that meant a lot. That was life. I mean, I wept at that lunch, and just, I will always remember the grace he showed me, because not everybody showed that kind of grace. It was a hard out for a lot of people in that day and age. They were no longer friendship. Friendship was gone. And,
What was if you had to pick kind of a way you felt during that time, what was prevailing? Was it you felt like a failure? What was it?
Yeah, I felt like a failure before God. I did. I can't tell you the number of times I wept in my pillow, just cried my face out because I had failed God. I read the scripture of God hating divorce. I read what Jesus said in Matthew about divorce, and I said, "There's no loophole here.
Right.
There's no getting around it. I've failed God." And what was funny, and I don't remember when I came to grips with this, but if a guy came into my office and walked through the same story, I would over and over be telling him about God's love, His mercy, and His grace.
Yeah.
And I couldn't accept that.
Yeah.
And the hardest part for me was accepting that I can be, you failed, you sinned, but God loves you. He forgives you. There's grace, there's mercy. It took a long time for me to accept that for myself.
And that's something, and we as pastors, I think, deal with this a lot, where we'll communicate things that we genuinely believe, believe to be true. And the problem, the connection sometimes we have trouble making is that it's also true for us, and it can be a million different reasons for that. Some of it is our own unhealthy expectations of ourselves, our misunderstanding of God's grace. And sometimes it's perpetuated by the feeling that other people hold us to standards that they would never hold anybody else to. And so we feel like we have to be perfect. And so, man, you were at a big high profile church in the midst of a really, high profile youth ministry at Southeast, at a time period where it was really, rocking and rolling. So I would imagine that you felt like you'd let a lot of people down, or, along with God, and some lost and missed opportunity there as well. So a lot of men have felt exactly what you've walked through. There may be some men listening to this right now that are feeling exactly what you're describing. So talk about that process, and however long it may have been, from I can't accept that grace and forgiveness that I would have counseled a man in my office to accept and come to terms with, to I've accepted this grace that's offered to me as well. What did that look like? What was that journey?
Yeah, it's funny. In the middle of all this, and the failure of not just the marriage, but I mean, like a regular guy, I had all my other sins that I was dealing with too, and I'm wrestling with this grace. And it was a long time. It was probably over a year. To be honest, there was a night at Northeast where they had a celebration night, and the lead pastor at Southeast came and spoke at that. And I was ashamed to walk up and look him in the eye. I felt like a failure. I was still wrestling with that, and this was probably over a year later. And I remember, making myself walk up to him and say, "Hey, Bob, how you doing?" And I get emotional here. I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, great message, and really awesome." And he looked me in the eyes, and I remember he was sitting on the stage casually, which you don't picture Bob Russell.
Bob Russell, yeah.
And he said, I want you to know that God's not done with you, that He can still use you. I didn't believe that.
Yeah.
I thought I was done.
Yeah.
At that time I was working for Ford Motor Company, and I thought that was, my life, which some of it was really good. I was making a lot of money.
Sure.
A lot more than you guys are paying me. Just kidding. But, it was like I thought it was over.
Yeah.
And he brought a level of grace to that statement, rocked my world. And that's when I started thinking about what that meant for me and what that meant for the idea of forgiving myself. It wasn't trying to pretend like it was somebody else's fault and somebody else's failure. It was, oh, you failed.
Yeah.
You messed up.
Yeah.
Suck it up, brush it off. There's grace. And that's not to just,
Diminish it.
diminish it.
It's precisely the reason Jesus came, though.
Yeah.
Add it to the list of failures, that we all have. It's not like Jesus was shocked by your sin. He knew it full well, and that he gave his life still. It's interesting. Bob Russell, for those of us who know him, and even from a distance, such a patriarchal figure, especially for guys, our age at that time, so for him to, as that kind of father figure, man that you looked up to in a moment where very easily could have, shunned you, very easily could have been dismissive or reprimanded, could have done anything that, patriarchal figures can do,
Yeah.
He decided to show you grace, and it seems like it was a real, hinge point in your story.
Yeah, it was very amazing. I'd like to say, just being on this man show, I didn't actually cry.
Oh,
I
yeah,
gotta-
you did.
I
We
did.
got it documented, man. It's okay. Real men cry. It's all good. It's all good.
But yeah, he just showed me a level of grace that it overwhelmed me that night. I mean, I think I ran to a hidden room or a bathroom and melted because I was just like, you hold on to that guilt. And I think so many men deal with that. They just hold on to so much stuff, whether it's an addiction, whether it's the failure or it's a second, third marriage. It's like you hold on to these regrets and guilt, or maybe you're in the middle of making a lot of stupid mistakes, which I made some stupid mistakes. And you hear something like this and you say, man, it kind of stops you in your tracks.
Yeah, and it comes face to face with shame, which follows us, and it can shame can haunt you, and I think we all wrestle with shame at times. And so when somebody in an authority position that you have a high level of respect comes along and addresses that head on with God's grace, man, that has a healing. There's a lot of healing that can come from that. So it's cool. I've heard you tell that story a couple times now, and I get chills every time you tell it, because it's a reminder to me as well, and you, in the positions that we're in, how it's our job to tell people about this amazing grace of our good Father, and that's a privilege that you and I have to be able to share that with people so often, and even on a platform like this.
Well, I think it was C.S. Lewis that talked about the weight of grace.
The weight of glory, but grace
sure,
is what...
glory, grace, same thing like that. But, there is a weight to it. It just, it in a positive way.
Yeah.
And it laid on me for a while. It was in a good, like I said, in a good way. But it was just like I needed that more than anything. I had people, you talked about, what people maybe responded poorly when all that happened. I had a couple tell me that everything that I had said, everything that I had taught, everything that I had done in ministry would be erased if I got divorced.
It's null and void.
Oh, yeah. And I was just like, and I'm sitting there at 20-something going, oh, maybe they're right. Every good thing I've done is worthless.
Doesn't
now.
count.
Yeah. And I don't think that they were right. I think their intentions were good, but I don't think that they were right in that.
There's a huge distinction between credibility. Does your credibility take a hit because of what you walked through, especially during that time? Sure, maybe there's some credibility but that doesn't erase reality. The reality is those words you spoke weren't your words anyway, when you preached to middle school kids, and the life change that happened as a result of those words happened, so divorce can't alter the past or reality, so it's fascinating that people I would sense that as people say things like that, they're doing that as an attempt to maybe well-intentioned to rescue or save a marriage,
right? At
worst, to manipulate you into, just doing what'll make them feel better, that kind of thing. But people around not only divorce, but whether it be death or just difficult circumstances, have a high rate of saying stupid things that aren't helpful.
I've probably done that too.
We all do, but we feel this pressure to like say something. And we also, in circumstances like that, feel a pressure to be the one that's going to say the magic words, that's going to save the marriage, that's going to alter the course. And it rarely happens that way,
Yeah.
So in one sense, you have Bob Russell who says something to you that you'll remember to the day that you die and really was life altering. But he wasn't trying to, in that moment, do that. He was just telling you the truth. I sincerely doubt Bob was sitting there thinking, man, what are the magic things I can say that will alter Kevin's life from this point on? He's just telling you what he
I don't even
knew.
know that he knows he had an impact on me that day.
Well, we'll send him this podcast as a reminder because to pastors, those moments of being told like, hey, man, you said something to me 20-something years ago, and God used that.
He might be going, what's that guy doing back in ministry?
Well,
that's not what I meant.
he'll call us. He'll let us know. I don't think that's the case.
No.
We'll talk about, so that moment happens. And so, we already know because you introduced at the beginning of the podcast, you did remarry.
Yeah.
And you are back in ministry. So how did all that happen?
Well, I was volunteering in the church, helping out in different areas. Scott Hatfield was on staff. You've had him on the podcast.
The name that shall not be mentioned. So,
oh, my bad.
Well, the problem is, so he really wears it as a badge of honor that he's been on the podcast so many times. And I mentioned, I think, that we weren't going to have him on again for a while, but then I realized I've already scheduled him for this season. So
you need a little dose of Hatfield every once in a while.
I get plenty of doses of Hatfield. So, no, he'll be on here soon. So you're working in the church.
I was volunteering in the church. I was working at Ford Motor Company. I was making six-figure. One of my best friends in the church started dating this girl who, I was dating somebody. I waited to date anybody until some counseling and getting a year past the divorce. I just felt like that was smart to put some time and.
At the age of 25, it's probably hard to do. It'd be easy to just brush past that fact that you just threw out there. You did a year of counseling and hard work before you kind of looked up and thought, okay, maybe,
Right.
As a 25-year-old man, you've already been married, you're probably going, I'd like to be married again. I'd like to be in a relationship. So was that difficult to wait a little while?
I was working
Busy.
70 plus hours, just trying to keep afloat and then volunteering at the church. So
you kept yourself busy. There's probably some practical advice in there too of like, don't just sit on the sofa and stew and, reflect endlessly about how bad things have gotten. Go serve other people.
Well, and so we, I was volunteering and my buddy started to date this girl who had a best friend who was dating somebody else.
Okay.
That was Stacey. She was dating some guy that was actually interning or doing a job in Japan.
Doesn't matter. You won.
I don't care.
You won.
That's right. So I was dating somebody else, but she was in the college age program, and I was actually doing some teaching and speaking and helping with that. And I remember Bart Stone and Scott Hatfield calling me into an office and saying, hey, man, you can't fish off your own dock.
You can't date the girls in this.
That's right. And I said, well, I quit.
Problem solved.
But it was funny. I was helping out, and I was like, every weekend from Ford, I'd get this Ford Excursion. They were brand new, big, huge beast, awesome looking vehicle, a manly vehicle. Yeah. And I'd drive all the college kids in this, and I was throwing money around. Stacey never noticed. She didn't care. It made no impression on her at all. But we became friends. Like I said, my best friend and her best friend were dating, and we became just friends.
So you're just around each other a lot because of that.
Yeah. And then somewhere along the way, we both broke up with our others and started dating.
Yeah.
And it was crazy because we only dated and for a few months got engaged and were married. We got engaged on St. Patty's Day.
Yeah.
I wanted to remember the day I got engaged, so I did it on a holiday.
Smart.
And then got married that July.
4th of July, probably, yeah.
7/7.
Okay, there you go.
I made sure I got married in the year 2000, so I'd always remember what day,
So did
it's
I.
21st year.
Yeah, I did the same thing, man. Yeah, that's a good call.
So easy to keep up with.
So she knew, obviously, that you'd been married before. She had not.
No.
Yeah. So how did she process that reality when she began to date you?
She's awesome. I can't. She just she always had grace. I mean, she was always like, I've made mistakes. I've got a past. I've got history, and we talked about it, and she knew about it before we even started dating. So it was kind of a non-issue,
Yeah.
Because she already knew about me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, because you've been friends for a while, so she went in eyes wide open. It wasn't like you had to sit down and have a talk.
Well, not completely wide open, but
from that perspective,
it'd take her 20 years to figure it all out. But
who did I marry? What have I done?
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's we got married and just my best friend.
Yeah.
And it's different, but there are those moments, like even in marriage for 20 something years, where. And the counselors will tell you that there'll be a moment where you're like, oh my gosh, why did I marry this person? What was I thinking? And those moments come for pretty much every couple. Yeah. You get mad or you get in a fight or there's just an obstacle and all the rules go out the window and you got to work through that. You got to fight through that and be prepared to. And I'm a lot more mature than I was when I got married the first time. And so it's just a lot different. Just having her be my best friend. I mean, she's the person I confide in. It's a different relationship than that first one that I had. And part of that is because I think I matured a little bit and was a little wiser.
How did you approach, here you are on the podcast talking about it, and you've got 3 kids. So how did you approach telling them that you had been married before? How did that go?
I waited. My youngest 2 don't know yet.
Okay.
And my middle child, he's a boy, Joel. He's that kid that tells me that mom loves him more than me, that kind of thing. So when he finds out, he's probably going to get mad at me and be like, "You don't deserve her." But my oldest, I talked to him about it probably 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
And just told him, "Hey, this is a part of my history." And he had a few questions.
Yeah.
But he was like, not a big deal. And of course, he's grown up in such a different environment.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a single friend that has, a mom and dad.
Right.
I mean, not a single one. He went through the list, and he's like, that have a mom and dad that have only been married to each other, and that's it. He doesn't have anybody.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, growing up, me with divorced parents, I can think of, especially when I was really young, at times where it was like I was the only kid who didn't have two parents at home, and now in a couple generations, it's pretty distinctly different, for kids. So one positive outcome potentially of that is kids have more grace towards people who, are in that situation because they're seeing it more often, Well, you might want to keep them off YouTube.
The younger 2 probably won't be interested in watching Dad do anything like that.
Yeah, I know how that feels. How that feels.
But I think my oldest will listen, and he's always been a big supporter. And he, like I said, he had questions, but he's always, taking it very maturely.
Well, kids tend to do well when we just directly talk to them about stuff. As hard and awkward as it can be at times, depending on the topic. So
yeah, well, the middle child, he turns 12 in July, and that's when I kind of figured I would tell him.
Pencil that in.
So I'll let you know how that goes.
Cool.
Because he's probably going to let me have it. But and then I probably wait a little bit longer for my daughter. But I think because of the years, I mean, it's been so long. But,
yeah. Well, as you look back, at how God's redeemed, which is a great word. It's one of my favorite words. He's taken something that was not good and he's used it for good. And you've got this awesome wife who's your best friend. You got these 3 kids. You're back in ministry. Talk a little bit about the decision to get back into ministry full time. Because that was something you had to kind of wrestle with.
Yeah. We had been married about a year, and I was a supervisor at Ford Motor Company. I'm working a ton of hours, making a ton of money.
You've mentioned that like 3 times. You were making a lot of money. So
I was making a ton of money.
I can't help you, man. There's nothing I can do.
I mean, yeah, it was crazy stuff, crazy money. But no, it was, it just was, and they like that idea that you get addicted to money. Which there was a moment, and we were sitting in our living room, just my wife and I. We hadn't had kids yet. And we were talking, and we were kind of having a difficult conversation. There was just frustration, and I was probably gone 90 hours a week at the job. And she was, struggling with that, which,
that's a lot of hours. Yeah.
And we were buying new cars, building a house. We were getting into that consumer, we had to have it all.
Rat race. Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, I just feel like God's saying all this is wrong, that I'm not supposed to be doing that. And she was like, man, I felt the same thing. I mean, I want the house, I want the new car, but there's just something we're supposed to do instead. And I said, to be honest, I feel like I'm supposed to be going back into ministry. And she's like, that's what I've been feeling too. It was just, one of those husband-wife moments where we're both on the same page and we're finally willing to talk about it. And I said, I think I need to quit and start to go back in ministry. And we thought, it'd be like, hey, quit, and 2 months later we'd be back on a job at a church.
Yeah.
It didn't work out that way, but it worked out in God's timing, and it was good. But that was the moment. I mean, I remember, sitting there on the living room floor, just talking about it, crying, and just she was crying, I wasn't, but just what's God want to do with us, and when that was decided, and then I actually was hired on staff at Northeast.
Yeah. So, as we hear, this redemptive story, and now here you are back in ministry, you take a little bit of an opportunity to talk about what you're excited about at the Georgetown campus, and there'll be a bunch of men listening to this, some who go there and some who might think about going there. So,
well, I love the staff, that team that's there. I want to give kind of shout out to them. They're such a fan. I mean, when something is needed to be done, they all do it. I mean, it's not like anybody's saying, hey, that's not my job. They're just like, hey, let's do this together. And they love each other and care for one another. Yeah. And so I love that aspect and love the community. Very similar to Shelbyville, a little bit bigger and a lot more restaurants, but the community is really nice. And I've met a lot. I've only been there, I think, 2 weekends and have already met some great people. I think they're excited to have a campus pastor. Yeah. And just super friendly. And I met this lady, Lucille. Do you know who Lucille is?
I don't think so.
She's 98.
Oh, yes, I have. Yeah, she likes to hug, too.
She said, I want to give you a hug. And she told me she loved me last week. And I hope she hears this podcast because apparently she's got a good in with John. Yeah,
she comes and sees John every time she has a birthday. So, and the last time I was in Georgetown, she gave me a big old hug. So
she
it's always good to see her. She doesn't look 98.
No.
She doesn't look 98. When her daughter walked me over to meet her, she said, my mom's 98. She wants to meet you. I was looking around like, where's the 98-year-old? Because she doesn't look 98. So, well, the staff is really excited to have you. I know the folks are really excited to have you up there in Georgetown, and all of us are. And so I'm glad that we were able to get you on the podcast, not only to share your story, but also so that folks in Georgetown can know your story and know the way God's unbelievable grace has impacted your life. And that'll give them a good perspective on why you're such a huge dispenser of, God's grace in other people's lives as well. So
sometimes that grace is learned by experience more than it's taught and just sucked in. It's something you have to learn, and
absolutely
good.
God does His best work when we're at our worst.
Yeah, so good lesson for me.
Well, hey everybody, thanks for listening to the podcast. As always, share this with someone you think it might help, and we will catch you next time on Locker Room. Peace.